So, Mr. Agnew.
Thank you. I was rung up yesterday by someone from the Australian Embassy, and I didn't have time to talk to them at length then, but they've sent me a briefing document, and I think we've got two debates now, haven't we? One on the Australian side of things and one on the New Zealand side. One or two other speakers have said they'll just speak once, and that applies to me as well. What the Australians didn't like was the attitude of the opening paragraphs. And they said that when it came to New Zealand, the opening paragraph talked about an ambitious, balanced and comprehensive FTA, free trade agreement. You know, let's go for it. When it came to Australia, the language was rather different. Oh, we're facing a very competitive export-focused agricultural sector. The instinct was all defence. I think I've had a little bit of an answer to that in here this morning. One or two of the speakers have talked about wine. Trying to sell European wine to Australia isn't as free and easy as you might think. Apparently you're up against, I don't know this, but what I've heard in here this morning is that you're up against non-tariff barriers and all sorts of hidden things. Well, I'm speaking to somebody from the Australian embassy after this debate, so I'll ask them all about that. And if you want to come along to my office, Jim, and join in, you may do so. But that may offer some sort of explanation as to why there is this discrimination, it would seem, against Australia and not New Zealand. Then, of course, with this new trading arrangement with these two countries, you've got to think about the impact of Brexit, which will be very significant because disproportionately a lot of what New Zealand sends to the European Union actually goes to the UK, about a third, I think, and they enjoy some tariff rate quotas on this, where they don't pay tariffs, and interestingly, they're not up to the ceiling of these quotas. You'd have thought they'd have gone to taken every last ton, but they're not, because they're able to sell so much to Southeast Asia. This is this huge market right on their doorstep. So there was, I feel, less to fear here than people perhaps think, that actually the European market may be declining a little bit, whereas the Southeast Asian market is expanding for them enormously, and of course it's easy for them to get there. Don't let us forget that New Zealand farmers and Australian farmers, basically it's a family farm setup. They're not huge corporations and factory farms and all that sort of emotional language. They are farmers there who farm without any government support. However, one has got to point out that farmers in the European Union do have increased costs because of legislation. So let's just look at some of them. EID, electronic identification, individual identification of sheep. We have to do it here. Sheep farmers have to do it. It's quite expensive. New Zealand and Australian farmers don't have to do it, but they can send the meat here without that sort of identification. Then we've got nitrate vulnerable zones. I don't think such things exist in Australia and New Zealand, but our capacity or our ability to manage our farms the way we would like to be optimum, is restricted by these NVZs. Then you've got something like the burial of farm stock. I can recall a time when we were able to bury our farm stock, the fallen stock, the ones that got ill and infirm, etc. Now we have to have them taken away and incinerated, and people on that side of the house talking about saving the planet. Well, much easier to bury them than burn them if you want to save the planet. Then, of course, we've just got smaller things like dentition. Once those first true teeth erupt, that animal ceases to be a prime lamb and becomes a cull ewe. And they don't face that same thing over there. And others have mentioned air miles, although they've dressed it up in another language. Well, if you feel strongly about all of these things, you can go to the supermarkets in the European Union and say, look, are you going to back the European producers because they're playing the game on this, that and the other? And we will name and shame you if you don't. That's the approach I feel you have to take. And traceability now is everything, and European produce and British produce, particularly the supermarkets, want this traceability. We can supply it. It's far more difficult for that to happen from New Zealand and Australia. Thank you.